appreciate it. Thank you. Good morning. Again, my name is Rick San Miguel, and I'm in the Doctrine Division, Lessons and Best Practices branch. This morning, we're going to talk a little bit about, we're going to talk about lessons and best practices, and we're going to talk about electronic warfare, electronic magnetic interference, and some of the exercises that we have participated in and those challenges that we brought back. But the most important thing that we're going to be discussing is what we at the CSCB are doing to get after that. So that involves in the doctrine, the organization of the training, material, leadership, and education, facilities, personnel, and policy. What are we doing in order to make sure that those areas that the soldiers are experiencing challenges in, how we're getting after it and making it better? And that's we're going to discuss in various parts. So we do have a process. But before we get started, what I'd like to do is play a little short video. This is the third time that I've briefed during Augusta TechNet, and every morning I come up here and I'm like, what am I going to start off this time? Last year it was something else, something that was technology driven as we have progressed tremendously over how we do things and capability wise. And I was trying to come up with something, and then the guys downstairs, our team from Cyberspace Lessons Best Practice, had a video downstairs. Who's been at the booth of the Doctrine at the atrium side that has the Doctrine piece, Lessons and Best Practices, that has and have the Jeopardy? Who played Jeopardy? Did you win? You did? Oh, okay. There's a video that they're showing up in there, and I figured that this was applicable here, and it kind of sets the stage of what we're actually doing and how we're moving forward for the Army. So. Well. It didn't play. Excuse me, let me get it on here.
Our Army and strategic partners are on the move around the world, training, operating, fighting. Crucial to every effort, reliable and secure networks and systems. Without them, our teams cannot communicate. The mission in jeopardy. We are under attack around the globe, even right here in America. Relentless enemies are pounding our forces wherever they serve, 24/7, 365 days a year. Probing and attacking crucial networks and systems millions of times a day, slipping under the radar whenever they find a weakness. We must stop them.
So, who can all relate to that right now? As technology is moving forward, we're having to address all these new capabilities and and our adversary and stuff. They talk about certain things on this video that stand out. Crucial to every effort, reliable and secure networks and systems. I retired I got in Fort Gordon in 95, retired in 97, got 41 years in communications. When I was back then, it wasn't that much, track 113s, 145s, switches, I can't remember right now, but anyhow, TIC 41s, rat rigs, and so forth, right? Now today, with the systems that we have today and the networks and everything and stuff, so everything's it's a lot more crucial. But one thing that always stands to mind that I've always remembered is that every warfighter out there, no matter if they're artillery, armor, infantry, and so forth, they got one thing in common, and that's communications. And without that communications and stuff, they can't always perform their functions. So that's what we're gonna talk about somewhat today. Is as we have gone out and captured those challenges, those lessons and best practices and stuff, and what is the actual process that we do in order to get after that so we don't make the same mistake twice. This is the agenda we're going to follow this morning. One of the areas is the JRTC trends, Anaconda 16, our actual process, the Observers Community of Practice, and then where you can get all the information and actual questions. But before I get started, this is a team effort for the Cyber COE, and we do have our team here. We have one person that is not here. He's at NTC with rotation 1608 with 1-1. That's the Cyber Support Decorum below. We're going to touch a little bit on that in a little bit. But currently, right now, what we have JRTC is Mr. Jeremy Olson. He is an analyst that's stationed at JRTC and works with us, and he provides us all that information from every one of the rotations. So we are part of every rotation that goes through JRTC and NTC. And also two other analysts that I have here is Mr. Mike Terry and Mr. Lewis Crane. They go out on every rotation as well. One of the things that we started doing this year was getting involved more with National Guard, strategic units, ESBs, TTSBs as well. I do have a couple more analysts, but they're downstairs working on or manning the booth. We'll be manning the booth. So, bottom line up front, lessons and best practices. What's our mission? Our mission is to collect observations and identify gaps within .mil-PF. But the bottom line is to bring that information back to enforce that guide both the generating and identifying .mil-PF gaps in the employment of cyber operations, signal and EW in support of ULO, in support of operations. And the end state, of course, is enable both the generating and operating force in the unified land operations. At the institutional training, when we bring that information back, we provide that information back to the training developers and the instructors to ensure that they are teaching the most current and most relevant information as we have collected it from the operating force. At the same time, on the same token, we also provide that to the operational unit as the analysts identify those events that we collect from and provide them the TTPs and the lessons learned that's happened from other units so that they don't go out and make the same mistake twice. There's an article that was printed in the Communicator, and it's also on our website. It's called "The Answers to the Test." Basically, what it is that a unit can call us, and we coach them through before they get to the NTC or to their training environment, and we provide them what needs to be done. We're not actually giving them the answers to the test, but we're providing them information of what not to do, what right looks like. So our analysts coordinate with each one of the units and provide them that information. As I mentioned, there's a process. We're going to talk about some challenges that some of the units had. We're not mentioning any units, just some of the things that happened. But I look at it this way. I look at it as a challenge and how we're moving forward so that those units don't do the same thing over again. The first phase is the event opportunities at the CTCs, at joint exercises, umbrella weeks, key leader interviews, and so forth. But one of the important things is gather requirements from the Cyber COE SMEs to drive collections. We don't go out there and collect information without any direction. We have collection plans. We coordinate with NTC, with JRTC, and with the unit itself, and we'll show you how we do that here in a minute, to try to get the most relevant and prevalent information that we can to make that unit successful. The phase 2, the collection event, it's, as I mentioned earlier, so we coordinate with the RTU, the rotational training unit or agency, and so to go out there and identify those observations and identify those gaps. Phase 3 is something that we've been doing for a while, but we just now started. And one of the things that this drives particularly, and I have these little handouts out at the booth, is to identify the problem, identify the stakeholders, and communicate effectively. Major General Fogarty mentioned that. We took it to stride, and that's what we're doing. But the most important thing is we're identifying the stakeholders. In other words, who's heard about, we go out, not just us, but we collect observations, and they go into, what happens to them? They go into this big hole, and nothing ever happens, right? I've heard that time and time again. Well, today, what we're doing now is we're collecting those observations, identifying the gaps, and we're holding somebody accountable to go ahead and come up with a solution, come up with a recommendation. And I don't know if some of y'all were in Colonel Edmondson's, the Signal Commandant's briefing yesterday, but he mentioned about how that's going to drive change to POIs, how that's going to bring the information today into the schoolhouse, into the institution, to get after on the training side and making those changes. Now, we can do so because we can change POIs and lesson plans up to 30% without having to go redo the whole POI again and take it up to TRADOC. So that can be done, so we can make those things. Of course, we go through the critical task site selection boards as well. There's all kinds of other things and stuff, but this can be made on the spot.
Does that include extending the program, or just you got so many hours, training hours, and you get a 30% variance within those hours?
Unfortunately, no. For example, right now with Winter Increment 2, 25 uniformed Signal System Support Specialist has been identified that he will receive Winter Increment 2 training. The current course length is 16 weeks. The amount of time that they want to put into the Winter Increment 2 is 3 weeks. There was a request that was sent up to TRADOC to extend, there was courses of action that were done, to extend the course by 3 weeks in order to accommodate that portion of it, the Winter Increment 2. As it stands right now, we're not going to get that information. We're not going to get back in time. We want to start at the first of the fiscal year, 1 October. So what we're having to do now, or not us, but the schoolhouse, is take out 3 weeks of training throughout the 16 weeks in order to accommodate that at the end. So it does not. I wish it would. But we also got to look at the fact that now we could have soldiers coming in and spending 19, 20, 25 weeks. And that drives, today, as I mentioned when I first started, FRAC 113s, 145, TIC 41s, and so forth. We only had so much equipment. Today, oh my God. I mean, we cannot field equipment fast enough, and the capability and technology changes things so rapidly. So capability is out there, so what do we want? We want that new capability. The thing is we're sticking this capability at the tactical level, and we don't have the MOS to support it. So we can't train it all. So we've got different areas. So there's an issue there. So, but yeah. All right. So on the OCOP, it's a monthly event shared by G37 and led by us, by Lessons and Best Practices team, and this is where we bring in, as our analysts have gone out, and they bring in this information, and we identify who's responsible for that particular challenge. And whether it's the signal school, the cyber school, the TICUNs, and so forth. And they brief that every week, every month, until there's a conclusion, a resolution, solution, whatever. And so we can get after that. So we can get after that challenge. So when we're asked, when we're out there with the unit, how is this going to work now? Or who's the responsibility? We have that already. Or if a new material requirement is coming up, then we address that. So we identify those gaps or those observations, and we put it through a forum, and so that we can get after that. If we're unable to do that, of course, we got phase 4, consular colonels if required, and that can elevate all the way up to call to the Army Lessons Learned Forum. Who's familiar with the Center of Army Lessons Learned? And the key word there is Army Lessons Learned. So if we cannot identify or come up with a solution at that point at the Cyber COE with the CMEs that we have there, the subject matter experts, then we'll take it up to that next level. As a matter of fact, today at 10:00, I've got to attend a call, Center of Army Lessons Learned Army Forum, So as soon as I leave, as soon as I finish here, I have to go down and do that. And of course, the easiest one of all is phase 5 is dissemination. Get it out to everybody as soon as possible, and we do that through the Joint Lesson Learned Information System, or JLIS. Who's familiar with JLIS? Who's registered on JLIS? Let me put it that way. You know, if you're registered on JLIS, it's great because you have that capability to link to all the services, all the proponents, and find out what they're experiencing and can we relate. And you can link those observations. If it happens at MCCOE, let's say something that relates to D3SOE, deny, degrade, disrupt, space, operational environment, or communications and so forth, then we can link those and get to a solution or recommendation a lot sooner than that. The 3 C's, coordinate, collaborate, and communicate. And briefly, I'm not going to read those, but I just want you to all understand that in this area right here, this is our team, CyberCOE. And this right here is who we coordinate in order to make things better. We don't work in a vacuum, not by all means. And what we want to do is coordinate, collaborate, and communicate with everyone so that everybody understands and we can drive the challenges that we bring back in order to change those POIs or to address those POIs in the most current and relevant information. Provide information to the CTSSB or the Critical Task Site Selection Board so that they can go out after having more to work with as we're bringing information back. You know, one of the things that we've been doing lessons learned for a long, long time, but recently in the last 3-4 years, it's in the news a lot because technology changes, things are happening, and so I see it all the time. Lessons learned, lessons learned, lessons learned. You know, we can't. You know, that's great that we're getting technology and we're bringing information in, but we've got to learn from our mistakes. But more importantly, we can't repeat the same thing over and over again. I'm seeing things that 15 years ago that unfortunately some of our units are still making the same mistake. Why is that? We need to get better at that. So we need to make sure that we progress from that. So this is how we coordinate, collaborate, and communicate with everybody, internal and also external. I mentioned earlier about how our team coordinates with the units that are going out to a particular event. And they do this by 8 months out. They identify the CTC rotation or whatever event that it is. As I mentioned earlier, we have a full-time analyst at NTC and JRTC, and that has brought in dividends because we're there with the unit. And actually, like I mentioned, we coordinate with the unit with the S6, the EWO, the 255 November, the Alpha, the signal company commander, depending on the particular type of unit, and so forth, way before that they're going out to that particular event. We build a book internally and stuff, you know, to identify on use of FEMSA, the MTO, what soldiers do they have? Do they have all the slots filled? What's the equipment? Do they have Blue Force Tracker? You know, do they have Winter Increment 2, 1 Bravo, or whatever? So we can prepare. So when we talk to that unit, we know what they're missing. We know what we can provide them from other units. We don't tell them the unit. We just tell them this is what right looks like. Don't do this because second and third order effects, this will happen. You know, so and there's a lot of things, and you'll see in the next few slides those challenges that I'm talking about. Key thing is D180. D180 is 6 months out for JRTC or NTC rotation, where the unit goes and identifies the division objectives for that training environment that they're going to be in. What are they going to be graded on? One of the things that we need to progress on. And we understand that it could be an ABCT, an IBCT, an HBCT, or so forth. But as I mentioned in the beginning, what's always been there? Communications. Today with technology and the networks and everything that we're learning that, you know, hacking, cyber attacks, and so forth, everything is there. So we have to make that one of our training objectives from now on. Is not communications doesn't come in the networks and systems is not granted. There has to be everybody plays a role because every operator, I believe it was like 15 years ago when user-owned and operated systems, if y'all remember that, when we went to that, a lot of the challenges or the world-class cyber op 4 goes out to the units and at their rotations, and they do their normal, sends out phishing emails and so forth. Well, the users are the ones that are around there at the systems, at the networks. They're the ones that are pressing on that link. And that's how they get into the network. You see, the users are the ones that are continuing using administrative passwords when they don't have to. And once they get into the network, and if it's an administrative password, now they're completely in the network and be able to change things. So the challenge is education on everybody, not just the signal regiment or the signal corps or the communications personnel, but it's a user-owned and operated system, so we have to do that. Home station training, cyber support to core and below. Cyber support to core and below, as it was mentioned yesterday here in another briefing that was done, and I'm sure it's mentioned in other ones that have been happening, but it started in 2014, in November, I believe, October, and there's been 3 rotations, cyber support to core and below, that had happened so far. 3rd of the 25th SBCT, 1st of the 82nd, and 2-2 SBCT. And right now it's 1-1 ABCT that's ongoing right now. Each one has progressively has gotten better. The very first one was rough. We didn't really fully understand what that cyber support to core and below, what we needed to bring back and capture. But right now, with 1-1 being in NTC and going through a rotation now, there's a lot more that's placed on how it's supposed to function, so that we can bring that information back. You know how the unit's going to be doing. That's going to be exercising CEMA, cyber electronic magnetic activities, EWO or EW, electronic warfare, electronic protect, electronic attack, EMI, electronic magnetic interference. The rotational units, key events, RSOI, joint force entry, midpoint. Basically, we're there for a 12-day rotation, or in the box, 5 days. They're on RSOI and prepping and getting ready to go into the box. Within 60 days after that, we provide that information back to the unit. We collect that information that we collect, and we provide that back to the unit as well. And also, as I mentioned, within the OCOP. And again, distribution, the easiest piece of it all and stuff, is getting the information back out there. Any questions before we go into these? Topics of interest. And this is across the board in everything that we do. Department of Defense Information Network, DOD. Yesterday in some other presentations, there's been a lot of talk about the warfighting platform for all army operations and operating, securing, and defending this network, and data is only a daily operation. Yet, without the DOD, the first thing that we have to do out there is secure, harden, and protect that network. So, with technology the way it is today and all the capabilities that we have and the adversary having the same thing, it's not like it used to be 10 years ago. We don't take it for granted. We go out and we set up a network and we're good to go. So the DOD is your foundation, is your warfighting platform, is your foundation in order to provide the communications that's going to provide that warfighter in order for him to accomplish and do his mission requirements. Operating, securing, and defending the network is a daily operation. I mean, we've gone to the extent of having 2 new MOSs, the 255 Sierra, Network Defenders, 205 Delta, that provides that information, that makes sure that's reading that network and those scripts and making sure that there's no... right.
Said in his opening remarks, the most complex and most important mission that the Army conducts at this time is building operations. So units continue to struggle network in the box. Sometimes that's as a result of world-class cyber op core actions. Many times it's a result of their ability to maintain what today is a very complex network. And what Rick was highlighting that is we transitioned from the legacy where it was AS6, just keep my net up and running, right? To now you are actively defending that network on a daily basis against a persistent threat. Right? That's a real big change for our signal folks. And it's also no longer can just exist in that corner of the tent, right? It's no longer just the X6's responsibility. It's now a commander's responsibility about whether or not he can keep that network up and running, because that's where all his mission command systems reside. And so some of our observations on the rotations are that is still not fully understood. There are still units that think, oh, that's just an X6 thing, right? There are still S6s out there that are just, kind of doing a maintenance type role instead of really taking on the mindset of I'm being actively targeted daily, and I have to defend this the same as I would defend a section of the defensive line. So that's been one of our key observations that these guys have brought back.
Roger, thank you, sir. CEMA, cyber electromagnetic activities. There's been a lot of discussion on that. There's an FM that's being ready to get published in the next couple of months. It's FM 312, cyber and electronic warfare operations. We actually have the author here in the audience, Mr. Matt Hunter. So that's, and as the Colonel was also mentioning, that's something that obtaining and maintaining freedom of action in cyberspace. It's more than the S6 now. It involves everybody working together and bringing that information back and identifying how we want to proceed. It's no longer just steel on target. No longer just destroy everything and stuff. A lot of it relies on intel. A lot of it relies on the information that's being brought in. It could be a cyber cafe. A long time ago, depending on how things work, steel on target, blow it up, we move through. Today, it's that cyber cafe could provide intel back to us so we can provide or gather that intel and plan that mission or support a mission or requirement. So the commander is given courses of action where he can take that information and come up with a better solution. So a lot of it relies on that. There has been some demonstrations. Cyber Blitz that was earlier this year in New Jersey, led by CERTIC. That was one of the demonstrations that codified Major General Fogarty's conversions model. Who's heard of that? Conversions model is he drives. There's a 3-phase projection of how we're moving towards it. So that was demonstrated during Cyber Blitz. And the spin-off of that was Cyber Quest that just happened here recently at Fort Gordon. We don't have the actual results yet back from that. It'll be sometime this month. But that was another effort that was provided. We had some vendors, and it was electronic warfare focused on sensors and also identifying some of the new products and stuff that we're getting after for electronic warfare. Cybersecurity, a lot has transpired from that. As I mentioned earlier about As I mentioned earlier about the 255 share and the 25 deltas, cybersecurity tools, those are the ones that those 255 shares and 25 deltas actually do, that they're responsible for. And but again, that's something that's constant, that falls into the DOD, establishing the DOD network, and providing that information. Now, one of the things that I did want to mention is cybersecurity on the tools, on the cyber support, the core and below. As we're doing these rotations, one of the things that we do not have and is not fielded out there yet, or we have not filled those positions, is a 255 share and a 25 delta. very important to a unit in securing that network, right? So we're training those soldiers, but in order to do the cyber support to going below, we're augmenting those units with the 255 Sierras and the Deltas from another organization, from the 7th Signal Command. So, but we're going out there, and this is what we should be training. This is what we should be doing, and those tools are going to they're going to start training here at the schoolhouse, making sure that those soldiers arriving at the units are properly trained in order to do the training. The doctrinal roles and responsibilities of those key MOSs, as I mentioned, the 255 Sierras and 25 Deltas. Now, we are going through an MOS conversion with the 170s and the 17s and so forth, but that's upcoming. That's not going to happen overnight. That's something that's still being worked on. There's a mark on the wall, but that's something that we'll wind up to it, and all that information. Hopefully, the MOSs will provide the right training and in order to complete the requirements, to meet the requirements. The 53 and the 50 and the 53. That's also ongoing right now. Colonel Walsh, you can.
Yeah, so we talked about that. We'll go back to the slide real quick. So one of the things that Rick's organization does well is they go and grab these observations at the CTC rotations. They come back, they analyze what they've seen, and they determine if it's an issue. They vet it to make sure it's not a single instance, right? Like, hey, that was just a one-off, right? They collate that information from other CTC rotations, exercise doctrine. They're picking up the phone. They're calling operational units. And once they've vetted and validated that observation, they turn that thing into an actual product that has an issue, discussion, recommendation. So after the third CSCB pilot, they recognized some of the issues with cybersecurity and our ability to do DOD ops effectively. They turned that into a cybersecurity.LPF assessment, where we went through and highlighted, under each of those letters, we had issues and recommendations for each of those that we brought back to the Cyber Center of Excellence. One of them was the convergence of those two MOSs that you just mentioned. And so we highlighted a concern that between those two MOSs being converged, that there may be certain responsibilities that each of those MOSs had previously that would be getting dropped. Now, there wasn't immediate action on that, but what came out of that now is our folks are regular participants in the Signal Commandant's weekly updates, where they're discussing things like the transitioning of those MOSs, their programs of instruction, other ongoing initiatives within the Signal regiment. So we now have a foothold in there so that when they go to do the next CTSSB, talk about those, we'll have a representative at that CTSSB, so these guys can say, look, when I was on the ground at the rotation, these are the types of roles and responsibilities that this guy has got to be able to do. Really, Rick's key mission is bringing operational relevancy back to the .LPF process. So that's what these guys do. I want to put some on the piece he mentioned about the cybersecurity tools. One of the key observations that they made is that the enlisted soldiers, if they had, he mentioned that there was MOS shortages of certain MOSs, weren't necessarily trained on the cybersecurity tools such as HPSS that they were expected to employ in rotation. Well, those of you that are familiar with HPSS, Host-Based Security Services, if you don't have that kind of alerting and monitoring configured on your network, you pretty much negate the Army's tiered defensive strategy for our networks. Pretty significant issue. Rick's organization brought that back as part of the cybersecurity.LPF and is now working with the Signal School to update the POIs for certain MOSs, so they now get that training so that when that soldier hits the ground, like General Fogarty was saying in his briefing yesterday, and General Hodges was echoing, when that soldier hits the ground, they're ready to perform their mission. And with now DOD as a warfighting platform, the ability to do that type of task, effectively employ those tools to enable the Army's tiered defensive strategy, that's critical. So that's where this lessons and best practices organization really pays big dividends. Sorry to interrupt.
No, thank you, sir. So I mentioned earlier, we are at JRTC and at NTC. Hopefully, maybe the year after next, we'll be at JMRC. But for right now, CTC and JRTC and NTC. These are some of the, and this echoes some of what Lieutenant Colonel Walls was just mentioning, on the 25 Deltas arriving to the unit lacking the training in host-based systems. We identified that. We understand that. The 25 Delta MOS has been around for about 2 or 3 years, but we need to get it right. What exactly does he need to be trained on so he can support the unit requirements? So, and that's what we have on the 25 Delta. This information right here. Well, we got a rotation on here, but they use Security Onion. Security Onion is another security tool. It's an open source. Say again? Security Onion. It might, that's just a platform that it might have something in there. So, and that's something that also is being taught as well. But again, that goes back into changing and how we're going to be training and what we're going to be doing in order for the schoolhouse. 255 Novembers, Alphas, and FA53s. Lacking the knowledge to implement HPSS, ACUS, and ESM. Again, that goes back to training. Again, that goes back to education. Understanding what is the requirement, what exactly is it that we need in order to protect that DOD network. Things that we found that we're looking at, and I mentioned earlier about challenges and not to. How do we not make the same mistake again? So when those units, when we contact that unit, we tell them about hardening their network. These are the things that you got to do. You got to ensure that this is happening. And what weak passwords, not changing default password. I talked about administrative passwords a little while ago and stuff. These are things that users. What's that old saying that started off when we started technology? The weakest link is the user, right? The user is the weakest link. So this actually plays true. Old admin accounts, not monitored system logs. As I mentioned earlier, I couldn't remember. I had a brain cramp. As the 255 Alphas and Novembers are monitoring those system logs to make sure that that's happening. It's not automatic. We have to look at it. Anomalies. If you notice something that's going on there, we need to go ahead and look into it. So those are the things that our soldiers are not familiar with that right now. That's where the training and the education comes into play. 25 uniform, 25 Bravo training. Signal soldiers relying heavily on LARs and FSRs, field service reps. This has been ongoing for years, and my understanding from last week, TRADOC 2019, we're supposed to reduce the amount of FSRs for WIN-T and train more for the soldiers. So we need to get back into the soldiers learning that equipment, troubleshooting that equipment, instead of relying on the FSRs. So that's something that we see constantly, and Mr. Jeremy Olson from JRTC reports that on a constant, on every rotation that he reports, or daily reports that he provides us. It's always about the amount of time that the FSRs put into the rotation.
One of the reasons that we highlight that is because let's think about some of our principal threats that as an Army we're planning for, right? So we're very worried about Eastern Europe. Well, what's Eastern Europe going to look like if that fight occurs? It's going to be a maneuver fight, right? LARs and FSRs and all that works real well in a counterinsurgency fight when we're operating out of FOB, right? Does it work real well in a rolling armor engagement? No, right? So that's one of the things that these guys are observing and trying to make the Cyber Center of Excellence aware of, so that we can look to increase the amount of time soldiers are getting in training, so that they can start to do more of their own troubleshooting and maintenance, because it's not a valid assumption that we're going to be able to rely on that in the future.
Thank you, sir. 25 Bravos arriving at IT without the proper credentials to assume IMO duties. That's something that we're looking into. That's been a problem for years. But then again, 25 Bravos, the units that get 25 Bravos are not able to go into the network without the proper credentials in order to operate. And like I mentioned, these are just some of the trends that we've experienced. This is from FY16, FY15. This is constantly, it continues to happen.
Where's the breakdown of units? These are trends that continually happen, unit after unit after unit.
It does.
Where's the breakdown at in the units and identifying these and training before they come there?
Well, we have that, sir, but I don't feel comfortable identifying what units are doing what and stuff. What we do is we identify that, but generically we'll put it up there. We collaborate with the unit. We let the unit know. We bring that information back to the institution and say, this is what's happening on this particular MOSs. Let's get after it today, here, now, so we can get it out there, along with coordinating with the operational unit. Yes, sir.
So the biggest one I saw there was 25 Bravo showing up at units without SEC plus or any
Right.
certification whatsoever. And I know there's supposed to be policies put in place that they can operate under
Supervision.
supervision of a sergeant, but guess what? The sergeant didn't have SEC plus, or guess what? The unit has 70% strength of their 25 Bravos. I just came out of the night, I was lucky I was in the TV thing. I had a lot of Department Army civilians who had
Right.
these credentials. I was able to set a soldier next to a civilian, but it was really a struggle getting I had a 25 Bravo for a year in Korea. Came out of the schoolhouse. Most of my soldiers came straight out of the schoolhouse. I said, hey, I'll give you an AAM if you get SEC plus in 90 days. Because it helps me, right? Great if you can get SEC plus at the 11-month mark. It's great for you. It didn't help the unit,
Right.
right? But I can count on my two hands how many in a 2-year period got SEC plus in 90 days. So, we have to have a police call and open those things like who those soldiers for. But what I really needed them was preparing for the CCRI.
Right.
I needed them on the network, and I wasn't able to use them that way coming out of the schoolhouse. And I just believe that we have to go back and look at that. If that's going to be the requirement, put somebody on the network, give them administrative access, that they have to come to the unit. Because units, we try to create these unit universities and schools out of high, but as there continues to be more and more bills that the Army continues to draw down the signal for to find personnel for other entities, it's just not very doable.
Yeah, so I was just going to outweigh the great topic, but it's a great topic. So they brought that back from one of the recent rotations. We're in discussions right now with the signal school. The recommendation is for them to look at re-adding the certifications back to their assessment.
And I know it's time, money, resources,
It is.
but I would ask you to look at other MOSs in the Army, right? There's a criteria you have to do this job. Guess what? If you can't do it at a certain point, we recycle. And if we can't do it, we still need cooks, we still need infantrymen, we still need that way.
Well, the example we looked at is like the 82nd, right? You don't send a soldier to the 82nd and then the 82nd sends them to airborne school, right? You send them to airborne school en route, and then they show up airborne qualified at the 82nd. So we're asking the signal school to go back and make an assessment if that can be added. Again, it comes back to how many hours do they have available in the POI, what do they cut out of there. So that is a recommendation. We didn't miss that, and we are working with the signal school to figure out if that can be re-added. I want to go back to the gentleman's question here. Sir, you asked the gentleman asked this question beforehand. Yeah. So I wanted to follow up on your question. You really asked us kind of like, so what? What are you doing about it, right? New trend.
No, it's just, I see the trends up there, and something
The other piece I wanted to highlight for you, though, is remember how we talked about it in the timeline, and anywhere between 6 to 8 months, these guys are out working with units to get ready for the rotation. They're bringing all of these observations. They actually build a book that has observations from previous rotations, lessons learned, recommendations, and things like that. And so when they're showing up at the unit saying, hey, I know you're on the path toward the rotation. Here's the major lessons learned we've been seeing out of past rotations. And then they start working with the S6 or the ELO or other individuals alongside our cyber, who also has a team out there, attempting to train them on the critical shortages that we've seen in past rotations. So that it is very cyclical. They learn it here at this unit, and then they bring back and they feed it into this unit. It's farther back in the timeline. So these guys go directly to the unit. They go directly to the individual members within that unit that are responsible for those specific tasks. But at the same time, we're also going back to the Center of Excellence to look at, all right, what's under our house that we got to fix, such as like POIs and the different forces and things like that. So these guys are constantly feeding that information back at the unit level, but then also back at the institution army level. And some of that, there's been several instances where we've drug the horse all the way to the edge of the water. Like, look, man, you got to change all your password and all your devices. You can't roll it. Yeah, and you still do it, right?
Yeah, and I wasn't suggesting.
No. I'm not, and I don't feel like you are, but I just want to let you know, I want to give you a couple examples of where these guys are feeding the information back into the process. And many times it helps, right? You just show up a little better prepared. But sometimes folks just don't.
As a follow-up, if I may real quick, have you seen units, like a particular unit that has gone through this process and had deficiencies, and then they come back a year later or later and they fix them all, where they've actually learned the lesson?
We've had on both accounts. We've had units, and my analyst here will tell you, especially Mr. Crane, where a unit has gone through the rotation, had a lot of challenges, but then again, in the midst of things, in between the one rotation and the other one, soldiers PCS, soldiers leave. So they go back to the same rotation, guess what? They're doing the same thing over and over again because of the training, the education, and so forth. So you lose those key leaders. Mr. Jeremy can tell you that as well and stuff, So, and then we do have some units that are better for it, that come back and the soldiers are still there and they do extremely well. So, you had a question, sir? Yes.
So, rotational training and all that, so we keep evolving. So, I think it's quite a key point. Okay, that unit we have this, but come back to reset.
What changed? Right.
It's more focusing on the defensive side. The defensive side is the story.
If you've worked inside a trade-off before,
yes,
things move slowly, right? So, if any of you have tried to update a program of instruction,
slowly is an understatement.
Right? Sometimes that can be a year or more process. Now, the cyber realm, and many times EW and the elements in the signal side, goes operations, cybersecurity. That changes, right? The technology it moves in a much tighter circle, right? Things change over months, right? Where we really can have emerging types of technology that we need our folks on the ground thinking about, right? So what we are working with the signal school on is how do we do incremental changes to the POI that stays below the threshold requiring a full POI update with trade-off and kicking us back to that very slow timeline. So we're looking at ways that these guys come back from the field and say, hey, issue discussion recommendation, they can institute a small change to the POI that addresses that, and that way keeps the POI fresh, but it doesn't trigger us to have to go through the delivery process, which is not fast enough to keep up with emerging technology and changing operating environment.
right. But you also need to consider as well
was a cyberspace. The main objective was collapsing all the staff and equipment, right, accelerating information flow within CP. So soldiers might be responsible for one particular area, which is 20 feet away from the big post. But now they're collapsing all the staff, skip the whole place, and the soldier will have more responsibility, work on more tools, and or, I don't know, DZ or some other stuff. And then when you collapse the staff and skip the whole place, and then you may have to implement some automated solution system, which is called DZ, and then how do you do that? So there's a lot of stuff that's coming down the pipe.
Yeah, and you're absolutely correct. There's a lot of things that are coming down the pike. Technology keeps changing, capabilities are out there. Different security tools are relevant in the units. One of the key things that we're bringing back as our team is what's current and what's relevant. I mean, what are we doing today? You know, so the problem is, as Colonel Walls just mentioned, TRADOC is slow. So believe it or not, within a 3 to 5 year time frame for the Critical Task Site Selection Board, by making these incremental changes, as he was mentioning and stuff, you know, we could actually change almost the whole POI in 30% per year, you know, to get that before we get there. Now, problem is that we can't train everything. So we've got to pick and choose, as the gentleman mentioned earlier and stuff, you know, are we extending the course? You know, we're not. Well, actually, now we're taking out some information out of it in order to supply that. So there has to be a change, and it has to come from TRADOC. You know, how can we do that? Or what's a better way of educating and training the soldier in order to provide a well-trained soldier, talking about the 25 Bravos, and make sure that they get out to the unit and they're trained in order to get into the network. They have the right certificates. So education and training is key. But how do we move that fast enough in order to get everybody available? Right.
So further down the road, so not overnight.
Yes, sir.
We touched on skipping
The talk.
Where are we at in looking at our single MOSs and requiring folks to have top secret clearance? I raised your hands up there. How do you speak to the concept custodian? Yes, so most of the concept accounts are top secret. So we have to pull the 4 people we have at top secret clearance in the signal diet to maintain the concept account. You got to have 4 people on the account. But if you're going to be a separate administrator, guess what? You have to have a top
You got-
secret clearance. And
Right.
now we're going to this type of environment. And so where are we in saying, hey, you're going to have to come in with a top secret?
As I mentioned earlier with Major General Fogarty's vision of conversions, you know, the 3 stages. And we're right kind of like in between one and the second stage. Cyber Blitz, that was one of the main things and stuff, you know, is having everybody, you know, in the SCIF, everything was SCIF. So Intel, everything was right there and stuff, you know, so everybody, you didn't have to work, it wasn't compartmented, you know, in different areas. Where we're at with that, I can't honestly tell you. I know that it's something that we're looking forward into. Conversions works, but you're right. Everybody had to have a TS.
So the signal commandant, General Pugh, who's now headed over to the Yukon J6, he recognized that the officers are healthy, and now they're going to be figuring out who to prioritize within the enlisted ranks.
Mm-hmm.
So they've recognized it, but it's a significant issue, right, to get all these signal soldiers through clearances. And so what they're doing is they're figuring out who to prioritize first.
Start with the people that have the tech plus.
Make that recommendation.
Yes, sir.
Sir, kind of further than that, Major Carl Mayer, I'm on exchange to Canada at the Canadian Army Doctrine Training Center. What, and the general spoke about it the other day as we look at this and we start getting the security caveats, we talk about the interoperability. Just CAN-US, that policy and setting of this caveat is a huge issue because I can tell you that when we look at the equivalents here in the community service, they're not there yet. So as we wrestle with 2 eyes, 5 eyes, I don't even want to think about NATO. The challenges, the Americans are going to be far ahead, and we're going to find out the enemy is going to be more time. Worse than it is today.
Yes, that's true, right? So that what will end up happening is, I'm not part of the convergence team, but I'll tell you that is being considered, right? They've taken it as a key performance parameter that we have to enable coordination with unified action partners. Now, it may be that there's areas civilian operations. That's the easier of the two for us to be able to coordinate and share on. As we get into OCO, that becomes a little, it's levels, but it becomes more difficult. Five Eyes pretty good. NATO is the next goal. Right? We've got pretty tight relationships at the Five Eye level, and we share pretty broadly.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're running out of time. However, I'm going to go through the next slides a little bit fast, just so we can at least complete it. Anaconda 16 is an exercise that happened up in Poland. There was a fourth ID, I believe, went out there as well. One of the major emerging trend, and we can go back into electronic warfare and EMI, electromagnetic interference, something that we've gotten away from in the past years. But that's something that's very much relevant, that we need to start training in it again and looking at it and stuff, as far as identifying, detecting EMI attack, electronic attack events, not identifying, analyzing and assessing EMI or EA. That's something that one of our warrant officers that went up there and identified this information and brought back. There are two white papers that Lieutenant Colonel Walls and Chief W3 Godfrey have written. They've been sent out to all the COEs for comment. One is identifying electronic magnetic activity, and what was the other one, sir?
So
electronic attack. Right. So those we'll have them on a website. You'll be able to pull them down if you have a CAC user card, and we can provide that. The observation community of practice is like we were talking about. We bring back the information, collect the observations, identify the gaps, hold somebody accountable, and what does it change based on .NOPF? We had talked about 25 Bravo. Here's the ones. These are the current ones that we're working today, and who is on the hook for it, or who's is being held accountable. As you can see, the Signal School has a lot of them. 25 Bravo certification, as we were talking about and stuff. We're going to come up with some type of solution if it's going to be either the unit or us or who or what, or in order to have that 25 Bravo trained, or what's going to be the best course of action for that. Detection and response to electromagnetic interference, electronic attack. That's something that was one of the ones that was brought back from the Poland exercise. Again, something that we need to start teaching, educating at the schoolhouse for all the users. How do you identify it? If you think that you're being under attack or this electronic magnetic interference, what do? Disconnect the antenna, change freaks, whatever. If it's still continuing, more than likely that's what it is. But soldiers are not trained readily right now in that. So that's something that's got to move forward. Companies under-resourced, signal support personnel, of course. As much equipment, I'll tell you right now that in a regular company level systems, it's over 100 systems in a company, and we have one communications soldier there. It's a 25 uniform. One. Now he's the subject matter expert for installing, operating, troubleshooting, and so forth for that one company. And we're fixing to give him Win-T increment 2. Now, have we set him up for success? We have to look at that and identify. That's one of the questions, it's one of the observations that we're bringing back. Say, hey, let's relook at all this. What's the answer? Do we put another person down there who's the bill payer? Or do we bring a 25 Bravo? What do we do? So this is an example. Once we go through the OCOP, the Observations Community of Practice, this is an example of what they'll brief until we come up to a solution or resolution. At the bottom is the Signal Commandant, Cyber Commandant, whoever their leadership will sign off on and say, yes, I concur with that solution or resolution. So we're getting after that, holding somebody accountable. Collection events calendar up through October of this year, this calendar year. This is the events that we're actually participating in and collecting observations, identifying gaps, training the units, getting with the units and providing them the information. Articles that have been written that we published. I mentioned earlier about answers to the test. These are published articles. Installation of the docking station. I'm sure everybody has seen that or heard about that. Coming up in the next communicator. These are all articles and insights of the week that we publish on our website. Good information, good information to read. This is our website. Mentioned earlier about GILIS. Wrong button. GILIS, the Joint Lesson Learning Information System. The only Army-approved repository in accordance with Army Regulation 11-33, the Army Lesson Learn Program. That's where you can go and find all the services, all the proponents. The NTC, JRTC have their sites up there. You can see the observations they collect, and you can link them. And then, of course, also our website here, where we have a lot of information. We direct the units to this and so forth. It's a wealth of information here as well. And sites of interest in areas that the S6 COP, our Doctrine website, where you'll find FM 312, cyber operations, electronic warfare operations, and the Center of Army Lessons Learned as well. And this is us. Basically, this is our analyst, all the systems that he's got to do, and that can be a signal commandant, that can be anybody. But that's what we're experiencing, and that's what we have. Sorry to rush it to the end, but we're at 9:05. Any?
Go back to your link slide and just leave that one up. So
Roger. Thank you very much.